She was left to die in the desert, but the rancher save her Wild West love Cole Riker rode the fence line at first light, when the desert still held a thin layer of coolness and the sky looked washed clean. His ranch sat alone on the edge of the Red Basin, a wide stretch of sand and stone that could swallow a person in a single bad afternoon. Most folks in the frontier town of Dry Creek said a man had to be half stubborn and half crazy to work land this far out. Cole didn't argue. He liked the quiet. He liked the honest work. His herd of dustthorn cattle, tough, long-legged animals bred to handle heat and low water, moved slow behind the solar fence, their collars blinking green as the ranch's small drones counted them. The drones were old, patched, and dented, but they still did their job. Cole did too. He reached the far corner post and dismounted, checking the wiring with a practiced hand. The fence hummed softly, powered by the morning charge from the panels. In the distance, the desert rolled out like a sea, broken by black rocks and dry gullies. The planet's sun climbed fast, and with it came danger, heat, storms, and sometimes people who didn't belong. Cole's horse, Dusty, shifted and flicked his ears. Not fear exactly, more like warning. Cole narrowed his eyes. Dusty rarely acted nervous without a reason. He followed the horse's gaze toward a low ridge of stone where wind had piled sand into drifts. Something dark lay against the pale ground, half hidden. At first, Cole thought it was scrap from an old crash. There were plenty of those in the basin, burned metal from the early settlement days when folks landed too fast and prayed too late. Then the dark shape moved. Cole's hand went to the rifle on his saddle. He didn't raise it, but he held it ready. Out here, hesitation could cost a man everything. He walked closer, boots crunching softly on gravel. The air smelled like hot dust and iron. Near the ridge, the sand gave way to harder ground. The shape was a person, small, curled on her side, one arm stretched out like she had tried to crawl. A woman. Her clothes didn't match anything from Dry Creek. The fabric looked like layered threadmetal, torn and coated with sand. A thin collar sat at her throat, cracked down the side. Faint lights pulsed beneath her skin along her wrist and temples, soft like the last glow of embers. Cole crouched careful. He didn't touch her right away. Instead, he watched her chest rise and fall, shallow breaths. Dry lips, sunburned skin, she was alive but barely. "Hey," Cole said, voice low, steady. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Her eyes opened just a little dark and unfocused at first. She tried to speak, but the sound came out broken, not quite a word. Cole glanced around. No tracks, no vehicle marks, no sign of a camp. Someone had left her here. That thought hardened in his chest. The desert didn't misplace people. If you ended up on the ground like this, it was because you'd been pushed out of safety. Cole could have backed away. A stranger could bring trouble. Trouble could burn a ranch down to ash, but he couldn't step over her and pretend he didn't see. He pulled a canteen from his saddle and tipped a few drops to her lips. "Easy," he said. "Small sips." She swallowed once, then coughed weakly. Her fingers twitched, trying to grab the canteen. Cole held it back. "Not too fast, you'll make yourself sick." Her eyes focused on him for a moment, and there was fear there, sharp, bright fear like a cornered animal. Her gaze darted past him toward the open desert as if she expected someone to appear any second. Cole followed the look, scanning the horizon, nothing but heat haze. He slid his arm under her shoulders and tested her weight. She was lighter than he expected, too light. When he lifted her, she made a small sound of pain and her head rolled against his chest. "It's all right," he said, more to himself than to her. "I've got you." He carried her to Dusty and pulled down a blanket. Getting her onto the saddle wasn't easy, but Cole had hauled injured calves and broken fence posts plenty of times. He secured her carefully, kept her upright, and climbed on behind her to steady her. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than usual. The sun rose higher and the heat began to press down, heavy and relentless. The woman shivered despite it, her body working hard just to stay alive. Cole pushed Dusty into a steady trot. When the ranch came into view, the main house looked small against the open land, its walls built from plated wood and salvaged alloy. A windmill turned slowly beside water tanks. The drone tower blinked a sleepy red light. Everything was simple and it was safe, at least as safe as anything could be out here. Cole guided Dusty into the shade of the porch and dismounted, then lifted the woman down again, careful with her head and neck. He carried her inside, into the cool of thick walls and recycled air. He laid her on the cot in his spare room, the one he used when a neighbor's kid came down with fever or a ranch hand got hurt. He wasn't a doctor, but the frontier taught people to do what they could. Cole checked her pulse, fast, weak. Her skin was too hot. He grabbed a cooling patch from his med kit and placed it on her forehead. He dampened a cloth and wiped the sand from her face and hands. Under the grit, her features were fine and tired, like someone used to clean rooms and soft beds, not wind and stone. As he cleaned her wrist, he saw the markings again, thin lines under the skin, faintly glowing. They formed a pattern he didn't recognize, almost like circuitry. "Who are you?" he murmured. The woman's eyes opened again, and this time she tried to sit up, panic flashing across her face. She spoke quickly, words tumbling out in a strange language. Cole held up both hands, palms open. "Easy, you're safe, you're at my ranch." She blinked at him, not understanding, but the tone seemed to reach her. Her breathing slowed a little. She tried again, pointing weakly toward the window, toward the desert. Cole frowned. "Someone after you?" Her eyes widened. She nodded once, sharp and desperate. Cole's jaw tightened. That explained the fear. It also explained why she'd been dumped in the basin. People didn't abandon someone unless they wanted her gone or wanted her found by something worse. He offered her more water and watched as she sipped carefully. Her hands trembled. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can you tell me your name?" Cole asked. She frowned at the words, then pointed at herself. "Lyra," she said slowly, as if choosing the sound from memory. "Lyra," Cole repeated. "All right, I'm Cole." He pointed to his chest. "Cole." She studied him, then nodded again. "Cole." He sat back in the chair beside the cot, giving her space. He wasn't the kind of man who talked too much. Words didn't fix fences or calm storms. Still, he found himself keeping his voice steady, like a rope thrown to someone drowning. "You're safe for now," he said. "Rest. I'll figure out what you need." Lyra's eyelids drooped, but she fought sleep, eyes flicking around the room as if measuring exits. She clutched the blanket with tight fingers. Cole noticed the collar at her throat again. It was cracked, sparking faintly. Not jewelry, not a normal comm unit either. He leaned closer, careful. "That thing hurting you?" Lyra's lips pressed together. She reached up slowly and touched the collar, then shook her head. Not pain, fear. Before Cole could ask more, a sharp beep sounded from the ranch's security monitor in the next room. Cole stood at once and crossed the hall. The monitor showed the outer range, dusty ground, scattered rocks, and a line of heat shimmer. At first, he saw nothing. Then the sensor highlighted a faint signature. A ship, not high in the sky like cargo traffic. Low, quiet, moving like it didn't want to be seen. Cole's stomach tightened. No one flew that low over the Red Basin unless they had a reason. And if the woman in his spare room was being hunted, he glanced back toward the hallway. The ranch had decent defenses for predators and thieves, but not for trained hunters with tech. He returned to Lyra's room. She was sitting up now, staring at him with alarm as if she had heard the beep too. Her eyes went to the window and her face paled. She whispered a single word, harsh and urgent. He didn't understand it, but he understood her meaning. "They're coming," Cole said quietly. Lyra nodded, swallowing hard. She pointed toward herself, then made a gesture like chains closing. Cole exhaled slowly. He didn't know her whole story, but he knew enough. Someone wanted her back, not because they cared. Because she was useful. Cole rested a hand on the doorframe, thinking fast. He could send her away, push her back into the desert with a canteen and a prayer. But he knew what the Red Basin did to people who ran without cover, and he knew what kind of man he wanted to be. He looked at Lyra, tired and frightened, but still holding herself together with pure will. "All right," he said. "Listen to me. You stay here and you stay quiet. I'll handle what I can." Lyra stared at him like she didn't believe kindness could be real. Then slowly she nodded. Cole walked to the gun rack in the corner and checked his rifle. He wasn't eager for a fight. He had spent years building a peaceful life out here, but peace didn't mean weakness. Outside, the desert wind picked up, rattling the porch rails. Far away, the low ship moved like a shadow across the morning sky. Cole stepped onto the porch, eyes narrowed, mind steady. The ranch might be small, but it was his, and the woman inside hadn't been left to die today, not while he still had breath in his lungs. The low ship circled once above the Red Basin, quiet and slow like a hawk watching the ground. Cole stood on the porch with his rifle resting against his shoulder, not aiming yet, just ready. The wind pushed dust along the yard, brushing against the barn walls and the water tanks. The ranch looked small under the wide sky, but it was built strong. Solar panels lined the roof. Motion sensors were hidden along the fence posts. 2 old defense drones rested on the tower, patched many times but still loyal. Inside the house, Lyra sat on the edge of the cot, her hands gripping the blanket. She could feel the vibration in the air even before she heard the faint hum of engines. Her heart beat faster. She knew that sound. They had found her. Cole stepped back into the house and shut the door behind him. "They're scanning," he said calmly, though his jaw was tight. "Ship S too small for cargo, looks like a retrieval team." Lyra didn't understand every word, but she understood enough. She stood and walked toward him, pointing to herself, then toward the desert, then shaking her head hard. She didn't want him involved. Cole studied her face. "You think they'll leave if I hand you over?" Her eyes dropped. That answer was clear. He sighed. "Didn't think so." The monitor on the wall beeped again. 3 small heat signatures detached from the ship and landed beyond the ridge. Ground team. Cole moved fast. He grabbed a small toolkit and walked back to Lyra. "That collar," he said, pointing gently. "Can it track you?" She hesitated, then nodded once. Cole frowned. "Figures." He reached out slowly so she could see what he was doing. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I just need to disable it." She swallowed and tilted her head slightly, giving him access. Up close, he could see how thin she was. The collar had left faint marks on her skin. He examined the crack he had noticed before. Sparks flickered inside. Carefully, he opened the casing with a small tool. The device hummed louder for a second, then went quiet as he cut a thin wire. Lyra flinched, but when nothing happened, she touched the collar and looked at him in surprise. "Not perfect," Cole said, "but it won't shout your location anymore." Outside, the ranch's perimeter alarm gave a soft warning tone. "They're moving closer," Cole muttered. He handed Lyra a small handheld device. "This controls the back gate. If I tell you to run, you go out through the storage shed and head toward the dry canyon. There's a cave about a mile east. You hide there." She stared at the device, confused but trying to understand. Cole pointed to the back of the house, then made a walking motion with his fingers. "Go, hide." She shook her head firmly. "No. This isn't about pride," he said quietly. "It's about staying alive." She stepped closer to him and placed her hand over his chest, above his heart. Then she pointed to herself, then back to him. Her meaning was clear. If she ran, they would hurt him. Cole looked down at her hand. He wasn't used to someone worrying about him. A shadow passed over the ranch as the ship shifted position. Then a voice boomed across the yard, amplified through a speaker. "Frontier property owner, we are conducting a lawful retrieval. Surrender the asset immediately." Cole stepped back onto the porch. 3 figures in armored suits stood near the fence, their helmets reflective. Behind them hovered a small transport pod. Cole kept his rifle low but visible. "You're trespassing," he called out. "This is private land. The individual inside your dwelling is classified property," the amplified voice replied. "Harboring her is a criminal offense." Cole almost laughed. Property, that was how they saw her. "She's a person," he said evenly, "and she's under my protection." There was a pause, then the armored figures began walking forward. The solar fence sparked as one of them touched it. The figure stepped back, then raised a device that emitted a sharp pulse. The fence flickered and went dark. Cole cursed under his breath. Advanced tech. He tapped a control on his wrist. The old defense drones on the tower lifted into the air with a rough mechanical whine. They weren't sleek, but they were stubborn. "Last warning," the amplified voice said. "Surrender the asset." Cole didn't answer. Instead, he fired a single shot into the dirt in front of the approaching team. The message was clear. The desert exploded into motion. Energy bolts struck the porch railing, splintering wood. Cole ducked behind a support beam and fired again, aiming carefully at their legs. He wasn't trying to kill, just slow them down. One of the drones swooped low, firing small bursts that forced the armored team to scatter. Another drone hovered near the barn, guarding the cattle. Inside, Lyra watched through a narrow crack in the wall. Her hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from anger. She hated that this man, who had only shown her kindness, was risking everything because of her. She stepped back into the room and looked around. Her eyes landed on the cracked collar casing that Cole had opened. Slowly, she picked it up. Outside, one of the armored figures raised a heavier weapon. A bright beam shot toward the drone tower, striking it hard. Sparks flew, and one drone spiraled down into the dust. Cole felt a sharp sting as a blast grazed his arm. He ignored it, gritting his teeth. He had fought rustlers before, but this was different. These weren't desperate thieves. They were organized. He ducked behind a water tank and shouted toward the house. "Lyra, get ready to move." But instead of running, Lyra closed her eyes and focused. The broken collar in her hands flickered faintly. She pressed her fingers to the thin, glowing lines under her wrist. The markings brightened. Outside, the armored team suddenly froze. Their suits sparked and their movements stuttered like broken machines. The heavy weapon powering up near the fence flickered and shut down. Cole blinked in surprise. The remaining drone took advantage of the moment and fired a burst that knocked one of the armored figures off balance. The others tried to reboot their systems, but something was interfering. From inside the house, Lyra strained, her face pale but determined. She was pushing her energy through the damaged collar, sending out a disruptive signal. It wouldn't last long. Cole saw his chance. He stepped forward and fired at the transport pod's stabilizer. The pod tipped sideways and crashed into the dirt, sending up a cloud of dust. The armored team retreated quickly, dragging their fallen member. Within seconds, they were lifting off toward the ship. The low vessel rose higher into the sky, engines roaring louder now, no longer hiding. Then it shot upward and vanished into the bright blue. Silence returned to the red basin, broken only by the wind and the soft hum of damaged systems. Cole stood still for a long moment, rifle lowered, watching the empty sky. Then he hurried inside. Lyra had collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. The glow under her skin faded to almost nothing. He knelt beside her. "Hey, easy." She looked up at him, weak but aware. She tried to speak, but the words didn't come. "You did that," he said quietly. "You shut them down," she nodded faintly. Cole helped her back to the cot. "You should have run." She gave a small, tired shake of her head. He sat beside her, wiping dust from his face. His arm burned where the blast had grazed him, but it wasn't serious. "They'll come back," he said after a moment. "Next time with more force." Lyra looked at him with a mix of regret and resolve. She placed her hand over his again the same way she had before. Cole let out a slow breath. "I guess this ranch just got a lot more complicated." Outside, the fence lay dark and broken. One drone was destroyed. The porch was scorched, but the house still stood. And inside it, two people who had been strangers that morning now shared a fight neither had chosen, but both were willing to face. Cole looked toward the horizon, already planning repairs, defenses, and routes if they had to leave. The desert had tried to claim her once. It would not get a second chance. The ranch felt different after the attack. The air was still the same dry heat. The wind still carried sand across the yard, but something invisible had changed. The quiet was no longer peaceful. It felt like waiting. Cole stood in the barn doorway early the next morning, looking over the damage. One drone lay broken near the fence. The solar line had melted in two places. The porch rail was burned black. He had seen trouble before, but this kind of trouble did not stop after one warning. Inside the house, Lyra sat at the small wooden table, watching the sunrise through the narrow window. She had regained some strength overnight, but her face was still pale. The faint glow under her skin had dimmed to almost nothing. She understood one thing clearly: they would return. Cole walked in, wiping grease from his hands. "Fence will take 2 days to fully repair," he said, knowing she only understood part of it. He spoke slower. "More will come." Lyra nodded quietly. She touched the cracked collar resting on the table between them. Without its tracking function, it was only a broken shell. But it still carried pieces of her world, pieces of what had happened. Cole poured water into 2 metal cups and handed one to her. "You saved the ranch yesterday," he said simply. She looked at him, unsure if she understood the words, but she understood his tone. Gratitude. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ranch creaked softly as the temperature began to rise. Then Lyra stood and walked toward the workbench in the corner of the room. She picked up a thin metal tool and pointed at the broken drone part Cole had carried inside. He frowned slightly. "You want to fix it?" She nodded. Cole hesitated. The drone was old frontier tech. Nothing fancy, but he had seen how she disrupted those armored suits. Her knowledge was far beyond his. "All right," he said. "Let's see what you can do." They moved the drone body onto the table. Lyra knelt beside it and carefully removed its casing. Her fingers moved with slow precision. Though weak, she handled the circuits like someone who had done it many times before. Cole watched closely. The inside of the drone was a simple mix of wires, energy cells, and signal receivers. Lyra studied the signal core and then glanced at the broken collar. An idea seemed to form in her eyes. She gently detached a small, crystal-like chip from the collar and held it up. It flickered faintly, reacting to the drone's open circuits. Cole raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of combining them?" She nodded. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Cole handed her tools, tightened screws, and stabilized loose wiring while she rewired the drone's receiver with the alien chip. Sweat rolled down both their faces as the day grew hotter, but neither stopped. Finally, Lyra pressed the final panel into place and stepped back. Cole carried the drone outside and set it upright. "Moment of truth," he muttered, tapping his wrist control. The drone powered on. But this time, its hum sounded deeper, steadier. Its small light glowed brighter than before. Lyra stepped into the yard and lifted her hands slightly. The faint glow under her skin flickered once. The drone adjusted its position instantly, responding faster than any command Cole had seen before. He let out a low whistle. "That's new." The upgraded drone lifted higher into the air, scanning the horizon with sharper precision. Lyra swayed slightly, exhausted. Cole stepped closer without thinking and steadied her by the shoulders. "Easy," he said. She looked up at him, surprised by how naturally he had moved to support her. For a second, the world felt smaller, quieter. Then the drone emitted a soft, alert tone. Both of them looked up. On the far edge of the basin, a faint energy signature appeared, higher altitude this time. Cole's jaw tightened. "They're testing the area." The new drone focused its sensors automatically, projecting a faint holographic image onto Cole's wrist screen. The ship was larger than the one before. "They're not done," he said. Lyra's face grew serious. She walked inside and returned with a small metallic disc from her torn clothing. She placed it on the table and activated it. A blue projection filled the room, a star map. Cole stepped closer, eyes wide. He had seen maps before, but never one like this. Lines and markers stretched far beyond the frontier territories. Lyra pointed to a symbol flashing near the edge of the map. Then she pointed to the red basin. He frowned. "They're not just hunting you," he said slowly. "They're mapping this region." She nodded once. She then pointed to another symbol much farther away and placed her hand over her heart, her home. Cole leaned back against the wall. "So this isn't just about one person," he said. "It's bigger." Lyra's expression darkened. She drew her finger across the map, showing multiple frontier systems marked with small red lights. Expansion, control. Cole felt a slow anger build in his chest. The frontier was rough, but it was free. People here survived by their own work. They did not belong to distant rulers who treated them like assets. He looked at her. "You ran because you wouldn't help them, didn't you?" She nodded. "And they left you to die." Another nod. Silence filled the room. Cole straightened. "Then we don't wait for them to take this place." Lyra looked at him carefully, trying to read his meaning. "We move first," he said. He walked to a storage chest near the back wall and opened it. Inside were old communication parts, signal boosters, and long-range transmitters he had collected over the years. Frontier ranchers often modified their own gear to reach distant settlements. He placed the parts on the table. "If they're mapping the basin, others need to know." Lyra understood the intent. She moved quickly to assist, adjusting frequencies and linking the alien disc to the human transmitter. Their hands brushed once while connecting wires. Neither pulled away immediately. As the afternoon heat peaked, the ranch transformed into a workshop of quiet urgency. Together, they built a hybrid signal device, part frontier hardware, part alien system. By sunset, Cole climbed onto the roof with the finished transmitter while Lyra monitored from below. "Ready?" he called down. She gave a firm nod. Cole activated the signal. A pulse shot into the sky wide, strong, and clear. Across nearby systems, frontier receivers would pick up the warning. Unauthorized mapping, armed retrieval teams, a larger presence coming. Cole climbed down and looked at Lyra. Now they know they're not alone. For the first time since he found her in the desert, Lyra allowed a small smile, but peace did not last long. As darkness fell, the upgraded drone detected rapid movement from above. The larger ship had changed direction. It was descending. Cole and Lyra stepped outside together. The sky above the red basin lit with faint streaks of energy as smaller crafts broke off from the main vessel, more than before. Cole checked his rifle, then looked at Lyra. "This might get rough." She stepped closer to him, standing shoulder to shoulder. Her glow returned faintly, steadier this time, not just fear but control. The ranch lights flickered as the defense systems powered up. The wind howled across the desert, lifting sand into twisting spirals. Cole took a slow breath. "They want this land," he said quietly. "They'll have to earn it." Above them, engines roared as the ships moved into position. Beside him stood the woman who had once been left to die in the sand. Now she stood ready to fight. And the desert, silent and endless, waited for what would come next. Night settled over the red basin, but darkness did not bring calm. The sky glowed faintly as the larger ship descended through thin clouds, its engines humming like distant thunder. Smaller craft spread outward, circling slowly, searching. Cole stood beside the ranch house, rifle in his hands, eyes fixed on the sky. The upgraded drone hovered above him, scanning constantly. The desert wind moved around his boots, carrying dust and tension together. Lyra stood a few steps away, watching the ships with steady focus. The faint glow beneath her skin had returned, stronger than before. She was no longer only hiding. She was preparing. The ranch lights flickered as the defense systems powered up. Cole had rerouted extra power into the remaining drone, the fence grid, and the signal transmitter they built together. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough for a fight. "They came fast," he said quietly. Lyra nodded. The warning signal had worked. They knew others would hear it, but help might take time. A bright beam of light swept across the desert floor, scanning the ranch. The ship above moved lower, its shadow stretching across the land like a dark cloud. Then a voice echoed through the air again, amplified and calm. "Frontier resident, you are harboring a protected asset. Stand down immediately. Resistance will lead to property seizure." Cole almost laughed at the cold words, property seizure, like they were talking about land or tools instead of lives. He stepped forward slightly and spoke loudly. "You're not welcome here." The lights shifted, focusing on him. "You have interfered with lawful operations," the voice replied. "Final request, surrender the asset." Cole didn't look back at Lyra, but he felt her presence behind him. He shook his head slowly. "No." For a moment, everything went silent. Then the smaller crafts descended rapidly. Energy bolts struck the ground near the fence, sending sand into the air. Cole dove behind a water tank as the upgraded drone fired back, its new systems moving faster than before. The solar fence sparked to life again, crackling with power as enemy figures landed near its edge. Inside the house, alarms beeped steadily. The transmitter continued broadcasting, sending their warning again and again. Lyra stepped forward into the open yard. Her eyes focused, calm despite the chaos. She raised her hands slowly, and the glow beneath her skin brightened. The alien markings along her arms pulsed with light. A wave of energy spread outward from her, invisible but powerful. Several enemy suits flickered as their systems struggled to maintain control. Cole saw the effect and took advantage of it, firing carefully to drive them back from the fence. The drone swooped low, targeting weapons and disabling them rather than causing serious harm. The fight felt different this time. They were not just defending blindly. They were working together. One of the smaller crafts fired toward the barn, and the roof exploded into splinters. Dustthorn cattle scattered, their heavy steps shaking the ground. Cole cursed and ran forward, firing at the craft's stabilizer. The drone followed, releasing a burst that forced the craft to pull back. Above them, the main ship moved closer, its hull glowing brighter as if preparing something larger. Lyra felt it before she saw it. She turned her head upward sharply. Her breathing grew heavier as she sensed a powerful energy gathering. She looked at Cole urgently and pointed toward the ship. He followed her gaze. "Big weapon," she nodded once. Cole's mind raced. If the ship fired, the ranch would not survive. He ran toward the transmitter device they had built and checked the energy levels. An idea formed. "Lyra," he called, gesturing toward the device. "Can you boost this?" She understood the question. Her eyes widened slightly as she realized what he meant. Use the transmitter not only as a warning, but as a disruptor. It was risky. She walked quickly toward the device and placed her hands on it. The glow under her skin surged brighter, flowing into the machine. The transmitter hummed loudly, lights flashing as power increased beyond normal limits. Outside, enemy forces tried to advance again, but Cole and the drone held them back. Sand filled the air, turning the battlefield into a storm of motion and sound. Above them, the main ship began to charge its weapon. "Now!" Cole shouted. Lyra released the energy. A massive pulse shot upward from the transmitter, spreading like a wave across the sky. The energy struck the descending ship, disrupting its systems for a moment. The ship flickered, its weapon charge failed, lights dimming as power systems struggled to stabilize. Several smaller crafts lost control briefly, pulling away to avoid crashing. Cole stared upward in disbelief. "You did it!" Lyra dropped to one knee, exhausted. The glow beneath her skin faded quickly. The enemy forces paused. Their advantage had disappeared. Then from far across the horizon, new lights appeared. Several ships approached, frontier vessels, smaller but fast. The warning signal had reached them. Cole felt relief wash over him. The main ship hesitated. With their systems disrupted and reinforcements arriving, the balance had changed. After a long moment, the large vessel began to rise slowly, pulling back into the sky. The smaller crafts followed, retreating one by one. Within minutes, the red basin was quiet again. The desert wind returned, gentle and steady. Cole lowered his rifle and looked around. The ranch was damaged again, burned fence lines, broken boards, scattered debris, but it still stood. He turned and hurried toward Lyra. She sat on the ground, breathing slowly, eyes closed. He knelt beside her. "Hey, stay with me." She opened her eyes and gave a faint smile. "They're leaving," he said softly. She nodded. Lights from the approaching frontier ships grew brighter as they landed at a safe distance. Help had arrived. For a long moment, Cole and Lyra just sat there in the quiet after the storm. Days later, repairs began. Neighbors and travelers helped rebuild the barn and strengthen the fence. News of the attempted takeover spread quickly across frontier systems, and many stood together to prevent it from happening again. Representatives from Lyra's world arrived soon after, offering her a chance to return home now that the truth had been revealed. Cole expected her to go. She had a life beyond the desert, responsibilities among the stars. They stood together at the edge of the ranch as the transport ship waited. Lyra looked at the sky, then at Cole, then at the land around them, the windmill turning slowly, the cattle moving across the sand, the house that had become more than just shelter. She stepped away from the transport ship. Cole raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" She nodded firmly. Then she pointed toward the ranch, then toward herself, then toward him. He smiled slightly, understanding. Together they watched the transport lift away, leaving only the quiet desert behind. Life returned slowly to normal. Repairs continued. The upgraded drone hovered faithfully above the ranch. The transmitter stood ready, a reminder that even distant places could stand together. The woman once left to die in the desert had found a home. And the rancher who saved her had discovered that sometimes protecting someone changed both lives forever.